Hello everyone, welcome back to Global Echo Reports. The night the world held its breath did not begin with a sound. It began with silence. A strange, unnatural silence that stretched across cities, across borders, across nations already tense with suspicion. In the dim glow of command centers and flickering television screens, something was building, something inevitable, something that many had feared but few truly believed would come to pass. And then, without warning, the sky itself seemed to awaken. It started with a flash, distant at first, barely noticeable on the horizon. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the darkness above Israel was pierced by streaks of fire, long trails of blazing light tearing through the night sky like comets sent not by nature, but by human intent. Iran had launched its devastating attack. Air defense systems roared to life almost instantly. Sirens screamed across cities, waking millions from their sleep. Families rushed into shelters, children crying, parents trying to stay calm while their hands trembled. The ground vibrated with distant explosions as interceptors shot upward, colliding with incoming missiles in bursts of fire that illuminated the sky in terrifying beauty. Inside military command rooms, chaos was controlled with precision. Officers shouted coordinates, screens filled with trajectories, calculations, and rapidly shifting data. Every second mattered. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death. But this was no ordinary exchange of fire. This was something far more calculated, far more devastating. Iran's strategy had been in the making for years. Analysts would later say this wasn't just an attack, it was a message. A demonstration of capability, a signal to the world that the balance of power in the region was shifting. Missiles came in waves, some high altitude, some low and fast, designed to confuse defense systems. Drones followed, smaller, harder to detect, moving like shadows through the chaos. It wasn't just about destruction, it was about overwhelming the system, pushing it to its limits. And for a moment, it seemed like the system might break. One missile slipped through. Then another. Explosions erupted across strategic locations. The impact was immediate and devastating. Flames rose into the sky, thick smoke swallowing entire districts. Emergency responders raced toward the blasts even as more warnings echoed through the streets. The world watched in real time. News channels cut into regular programming. Social media flooded with footage. Shaky videos of the sky ablaze, the sound of explosions echoing in the background. People shouting, crying, praying. The words "breaking news" flashed endlessly across screens. This was no longer a regional conflict. This was global. In Tehran, celebrations erupted among hardliners who saw this as a long-awaited moment. State media framed it as a defensive move, a justified response to years of pressure, sanctions, and covert operations. The narrative was clear. This was not aggression. This was retaliation. But beyond the narratives, beyond the politics, there was reality. And reality was burning. Back in Israel, the damage was becoming clearer with every passing minute. Buildings reduced to rubble, fire spreading uncontrollably, hospitals filling with the injured. The human cost was rising, and with it the pressure on leadership to respond. And respond they would. Military jets were already being prepared. Targets were being identified. Intelligence agencies were working around the clock to determine the full scope of the attack and plan the next move. Retaliation was not a question, it was a certainty. But what form would it take? That was the question that kept world leaders awake that night. In Washington, emergency meetings were called. Advisors gathered around tables, maps spread out, options being discussed in urgent tones. The risk of escalation was immense. Any miscalculation could trigger a chain reaction that would draw in multiple nations. In Europe, leaders called for restraint. In Asia, markets began to react, stocks dropping as uncertainty spread. Oil prices surged, reflecting fears that the conflict could disrupt critical supply routes. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important oil passages in the world, suddenly became a focal point of concern. Would it remain open, or would it become the next battleground? As the hours passed, the scale of the attack became undeniable. This was one of the most significant direct confrontations between Iran and Israel in modern history. The shadow war that had been fought through proxies, cyber attacks, and covert operations had suddenly stepped into the light. And the world was not ready. Civilians bore the brunt of that reality. In shelters, people clung to hope. In hospitals, doctors worked without rest. In the streets, emergency crews moved through smoke and debris searching for survivors. Stories began to emerge. A father shielding his children during an explosion, a nurse refusing to leave her post despite the danger. Neighbors helping each other, strangers becoming lifelines in a moment of crisis. These were the moments that defined the human side of the conflict, the side often overshadowed by headlines and statistics. But even as rescue efforts continued, the fear remained. Was this the end of the attack, or just the beginning? Intelligence reports suggested more could come. Military analysts warned that Iran still had significant capabilities left. The possibility of further strikes loomed over the region like a dark cloud. And then came the response. Israeli jets took to the skies before dawn. Their targets were precise, strategic, carefully chosen. The objective was clear: to send a message of strength, to deter further aggression, to re-establish deterrence. Explosions echoed in the distance once again, this time on the other side. The cycle had begun. Each strike led to another. Each action prompted a reaction. The line between defense and escalation blurred with every passing hour. Meanwhile, diplomatic channels worked overtime. Calls were made, messages sent, attempts to de-escalate the situation before it spiraled out of control. But diplomacy moves slowly. War does not. As the sun rose, the full extent of the destruction became visible. Smoke still lingered in the air. Emergency vehicles filled the streets. The scars of the night were everywhere, on buildings, on roads, on people, and on the psyche of a region already scarred by decades of conflict. The question now was not just about what had happened. It was about what would happen next. Would this lead to a broader war? Would other nations become involved? Would this reshape the geopolitical landscape? Experts debated endlessly. Some warned of a potential regional war involving multiple actors. Others believed that both sides would eventually step back, recognizing the catastrophic consequences of full-scale conflict. But in that moment, certainty was a luxury no one had. All that existed was tension, and the fragile hope that it would not break. As night fell once again, the skies were quieter, but the silence was different now. It was no longer calm. It was cautious. The world had changed in just a few hours. Alliances were being tested, strategies were being rewritten, and ordinary people were left to navigate a reality shaped by decisions far beyond their control. And somewhere in the distance, another siren began to wail. Because in conflicts like these, the story never truly ends. It only pauses.